Welcome back. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Simply Susan Historical Sewing, Cooking, and Living. We're glad to have you. With jelly roll strips, and I just took them and I sewed a pattern and then a white piece and then a pattern piece. And on these, it is white pattern white. Okay, so as you saw in the first little clip, I'm making this quilt out of jelly roll pieces. These are just long strips of fabric that are pre-cut into 2.5-inch strips. I took all of those jelly roll strips and I sewed them together in the alternating pattern that you saw in the first clip. Here I am, now that once I had all of my strips sewn together, I cut them into squares, and now I am just pinning the squares together in the layout that I've chosen, and then I'm going to take them over to the sewing machine and get each strip sewn together. Once I get a row sewn together, I'm just going to keep building on that until it gets longer. All right, so I'm going to start sewing together the quilt blocks that we laid out in the previous video. I'm currently sewing on my Brother XR 1355 sewing machine. It is perfectly fine. I don't have any complaints about it. I am working with a quilting 1/4-inch piecing foot, which I have found to be so helpful for these types of projects. Also, I'm not sure if you can see what my sewing machine is resting on, but my sewing machine is resting on another sewing machine. So a little bit of inception action here. But at any rate, the sewing machine that it is resting on is actually an old Singer Model 66 treadle machine. Oh, come on. And that machine is one that still functions just fine, and I will use that in some of the projects that we make because I find doing things historically to be incredibly interesting, and so I figure I might as well use that machine. It works. It's not too difficult. I think the biggest limitation that I find with it is it cannot backstitch. So, you know, for quilting, like where you don't necessarily need to backstitch at the end of each block or something like that because they get folded with each other and the seams end up getting kind of fixed in that way whenever they are sewn together with other seams. It's not that big of a deal, but making garments and some of that, it can be very time consuming because you can, you know, make it go backwards, but you have to stop, lift the foot, flip the entire piece around. Is the piece too big to, you know, flip around like that? So it can just sort of be a little bit of a drawback to try to do some things with that. Now, I know that for years, I don't actually know how long, but the sewing machines like that were all that they had. So obviously it can be done with a machine that has some limitations like that, but sometimes I like to cheat and use my modern machine and just, you know, get the project done that way. And I think a lot of it, working in original historical practice is something that I find incredibly interesting. I find the study of that to be pretty fascinating, but I don't think that's something that I'm particularly as interested in doing. I don't have the breadth of knowledge or the skill level to do some of the incredibly detailed handwork. So for now, I plan on just sort of, you know, muddling through things the best that I can and trying to learn as I go about these projects. And if anybody has more experience with that, has any more tips, has anything that they want to share, please share those in the comments. I'd really like to hear about any projects that you've made, any questions that you have. And I think I probably will attempt some things with more original practice, but for right now, this quilt is one that is clearly, you know, modern design, modern colors, modern fabrics. We're just going to keep that more modern theme going and just use the electric machine that we have. But I just find it so interesting to go from literally what just looks like scraps of fabric. Even the pre-cut rolls are just long strips, long scraps, and without too terribly much effort, turn it into a full, complete, usable item that, you know, is a functional blanket that can be used. Okay. Hi everybody. So what we are making here, the style of quilt that we're making, is called a patchwork quilt. This is a quilt in which the top layer, which is what we have put together here, consists of pieces of fabric sewn together to form a design. I don't know what the official name would be for this particular design, but this is what I came up with whenever I was laying out the squares that we had sewn and cut. And this is the final design for the quilt that we are going to be finishing up together. So originally this was done to make full use of leftover scraps of fabric, but now oftentimes fabric is bought specifically for a design. Historically, garments that were no longer usable or had some damage that they couldn't serve their original purpose were often reused and made into quilts. So quilting was one of the very first forms of recycling and upcycling that ever existed. The quilt is formed of 3 layers. We have the patchwork quilt top that we made here, and then we will put behind this a layer of insulation or the batting that's going to make it a little bit soft and provide you with some warmth, and also a layer of backing, which is usually just a solid color. I like to use a fabric that's called minky, which is super soft, very kind of velvety feeling. It just gives a really nice feel to it and really just makes you want to cuddle up with your quilt. So anyway, once we get these 3 pieces, 3 layers put together, then we'll go through and we're going to stitch them all together so that they all stay together like we want them to. And this process of stitching all of the layers together is called quilting. Though quilting has a very long history, likely more than 5 millennia, and takes various forms in many cultures, the block-style patchwork quilt became a distinct expression of 19th century America, evolving into a representative folk art of interest to scholars that is still produced today. 18th century patchwork was a ladies' leisure pursuit in both Europe and North America, with the earliest surviving specimens from Wiltshire in 1718 and Quebec in 1726, and both of these were made of silk. The lack of information about earlier quilts made of humbler fabric is partly attributed to such quilts being intimately connected to everyday life in the Dutch and English settlers in the New World. So quilting was a very popular early American pastime, first in the Midwest, where quilting circles were a common social pastime for women, and later in the Great Plains, especially from 1825 to 1875, with quilting bees, when many women would gather together around a quilt frame to do the stitching of the 3 layers together. It was not uncommon in early American culture for quilts to reflect a mosaic of a woman's life, often including swatches of material from memorable events such as a wedding gown or a child's baptismal or christening garment. Now, it is common for people to stitch together quilts using their old t-shirts that might have some kind of memory to them, and it is just a way that these traditions continue in our lives today. When I was in college, I worked as an assistant stage manager, costume creator, and makeup designer on the musical Quilters. It was absolutely one of my favorite shows to work on, and I would definitely encourage anyone that has the opportunity to do so to see that show. While quilting spans across many cultures, the Amish and Mennonite women of Pennsylvania Dutch country, where I live very close to where I'm at here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, they have been creating and quilting exquisite quilted masterpieces since the mid-19th century and quite possibly even earlier. Amish quilts serve as the ultimate expression of frugality. They not only serve a practical, functional purpose, but they also serve as a form of entertainment. Quilting also, in addition to meeting the needs of just using up fabric and keeping warm, quilting can also be part of social movements. In 1987 in San Francisco, the NAMES Project commenced as a memorial to the lives of people who died from AIDS and related illnesses, with quilt panels that were made by their loved ones. The quilt grew to comprise many thousands of panels and spawned similar projects in countries around the globe. In later years, other subject and event-specific community-based quilts have also been created. So, thank you so much for joining me in the piecing of this quilt top and for a brief journey into the history of quilting. I hope you have enjoyed watching this project and watching the making of this project as much as I have enjoyed making it and sharing it with all of you. If this is your first time here, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. You have no idea how much that means to me and helps my channel to grow and helps me know that you want to keep seeing these projects and helps me know if there are any projects in particular that you would really like to see. So if you could please do those things for my video, it would be so helpful and so meaningful. In an upcoming video, we will choose the backing, secure the batting and the backing together on this quilt top, and then we will get to the business of quilting. So thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me, and I can't wait to see you all again. Bye!